See this work? That's cool. Okay, I think we're live. Guys, I'm going to start today's video talking a little bit about this nervousness that a lot of people have when they've got herniated discs. They don't want to make it worse, and that is completely reasonable. But unfortunately, that fear for making that herniated disc worse stops them from doing the right sort of things. Oh, I know about exercises, but I don't want to do some and do the wrong ones and make my back pain worse, so I'll do nothing. And this is probably one of the biggest mistakes I would suggest, because the decision not to get stuck into rehabilitation work, proper strength building, objectively progressive rehabilitation work, is probably the biggest misaction. Because, and I'm hopefully going to explain why, and even if like one of you guys watches this and changes that viewpoint, it'll be a success. Because there is this inappropriate view of proper strengthening exercises, a rehabilitative program, a structure, a problem-solving route. Like for some reason, that's more daunting than quote unquote doing nothing. And I think the most helpful place to start in this particular chat, when we're thinking about these lower back injuries and getting better and not wanting to make that disc worse, is to very clearly realize that you're in pain every day or frequently. You're having flare-ups of your sciatica. You've got the herniated disc. Generally speaking, that implies we've had a problem for a long period of time. And you've been living life every day. And the realization that none of you guys, as worried as you might be, none of you are doing nothing every day. You're all doing something. Even for the individual that's just sat down all day, right? You're sat down squashing down on those discs. You are making the problem worse. This is important. By doing quote unquote nothing, we are not doing things that could help us. And it's completely understandable because there is such a mesh of conflicting information out there, and hopefully some of these live sessions that we do help you guys start to discern between the stuff that's maybe a bit misguided and the stuff that's actually going to give you more tangible results. And so that is one of the big reasons we're so for education. Because if you're sat there like, I don't want to do exercise, I don't want to make my back worse, whatever, then you dive headlong into education. One of the things we say to certain members when they start the program, what's the first thing? Well, actually, no, not one of the things. What's the first thing we tell people to do? Not exercise. After you sign up to the program, for example, to deal with your back pain, your sciatica, your herniated disc in the lower back, the first thing we tell you to do is go and do the strategy videos. The strategy videos are education, how to safely approach exercises. If you just wake up one morning and go, I'm really worried, I'll just try exercises, and you just go up there and you start doing squats, who knows what's happening? You certainly don't, because you didn't watch a strategy video, how to do the thing. You just thought exercises. Well, exercises means everything and nothing at the same time. And so the first thing you do is actually strategy. You figure out, how am I going to approach the exercises? Then you watch, for example, tutorial videos on how to do the exercises. And once you've watched those, you then go and practice them, right? That is correct. Just walking in to for example, even with your local physiotherapist or your local chiropractor, your local osteopath, you're going to the appointment, you're not going to get nearly as much strategy, guidance, education going through the exercise you might do with them as you would if you were, for example, a member of the program. There's a number of strategy videos that we talk about to help you guys understand how you actually go about safe rehabilitation, safe exercises. And that's where exercises starts. It starts up here with the education. And do you know what that does? That often dispels a lot of the fear about making it worse, because you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, that it is a safe and careful approach. We got a comment in here, I can't quite see. MJC, when I did PT, it was just a whole bunch of random exercises, made no sense. Exactly. So many of you guys in the comments let me know, you will have had the experience, you go in to see the physio and it's like, yeah, we're going to go over here and we're going to do a child's pose. So we're going to go lie down and we're going to just go over here. And then we're going to do, I don't know, we'll do a back extension. So we'll do some of the, and then we're going to go and do like a pigeon pose. And you're just like, this makes no sense. This isn't any kind of rehabilitation. This is just a, go into the bucket and put your hand in and take out which exercise we're going to start with. That is not rehabilitation. And that is unfortunately, just like MJC said there, that is sometimes the exercises that you're doing or have been given. That's that physio appointment you've been waiting for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, 3, 4, 5 months. You get to the PT and that's what you have to do. And unfortunately, that's so frequently the case. And no wonder you're worried about making your back pain or your herniated disc worse. But then we take the step back, and with that education, we start to understand that, you know, you're doing things every single day. Sitting down, getting up, getting dressed, going to the bathroom. Maybe you're still going to work. Maybe you're looking after the kids. Maybe you're walking the dog. These are examples that we get time and time again of patients in the clinic, members of the program over the years, that are doing all of these different things every day whilst being worried about doing rehab. And we have to acknowledge that the action of feeding the dog in the morning involves you getting up, getting dressed, going downstairs, finding wherever the dog food is, collaring the dog, bringing them in, putting the food on the floor or whatever you might do, and. There are a bunch of different movements that are significantly more problematic than you carefully doing a squat like this, holding onto a chair. You might say, Mike, but that's going to hurt me. It's like, okay, well, if that is going to hurt you, if you're worried about that, you must be petrified of feeding the dog, but you do it anyway. You do it anyway, time and time again. Just looking at some of the comments here. I had bilateral L5-S1 stress fracture in stage 1 disc slip, and I cooked. I'm 19 and a footballer. You're probably going to need to back off a little bit with the football and do the appropriate rehabilitation work. But if it's only a stress fracture, I'm assuming by disc slip we would mean a disc bulge or herniation, because the discs don't really slip. And I'm assuming that is the case as opposed to as distinct from a spondylolisthesis, which would be a slip of the vertebra. If it's just a stress fracture, I'm assuming there's no separation and no spondylolisthesis. But you've got to do the rehab work. At the age of 19, you're going to have youth working for you, healing times working for you, all of that great stuff. However, you're often going to have impatience. But I do football. I don't know how professional that is, how competitive that is in that particular environment. We're doing a lot of activities that we'd rather be doing compared to our rehab. And what often happens in this scenario is that you'll start the rehab, you engage with the education process, and you start doing better. And then, because you're feeling better, it's maybe been a couple of weeks, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, you get straight back into the football. And then we start making things worse again because you haven't done the healing side of things, the strengthening side of things. The strengthening stuff takes a back seat. And then we start doing all those other bits and pieces. So it's something to really, really watch out for. Richard has said, I had CES twice and now I have DISH. I'm diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, I'm assuming we're referring to there. And it scares me. And I understand exercise scares you, Richard. But what's more scary is doing a bunch of random stuff every day, right? Or what should be more scary, or appropriately, not that it should be scary. None of this stuff should be scary per se, but we should appropriately grade everything, right? If we're going to be fearful of exercises, we'll at least apply the same measuring stick to every single other thing that you're doing every day, because those other things have no material benefit for your recovery, for your back getting better, but the exercises do. And like I said earlier, Richard, this is very much why when we get members come through the program, it's very much about focusing on, you do the learning first, right? You do the strategy first, and then you might then carefully, after you've watched tutorial videos, then start approaching the learning of the exercises. There's no rush. There's no rush. There doesn't need to be a rush, but we do need to do the doing. Very important. Jen Smith says, I have a couple of questions. In the last live, you said you shouldn't do static stretches before a workout. Does that include the Yes, that certainly does. So this is where strategy is important. This is where structure is important. When we talk about relief and strengthening, a lot of you guys follow things like the core 5 that we talk about. If you're in the program, you're doing those exercises, dead bug march, squat, hip hinge, step up, single leg hip hinge. You're doing all of those, and you've got your relief-based practices, right, which would include some of those stretches. We always say explicitly, you do not do your stretching work before your exercises. Your exercise is as distinct from your relief work. Your exercise being your rehab being your squat, hip hinge, and step, your workout, right? And then your relief-based work is a routine that is a practice to relieve stress and strain on the body. We don't do that and then go and put stress and strain on the body. We do it afterwards. We do it afterwards. We do some nice decompression work afterwards rather than before. Very important. And Jen said, if the tau decompression causes tingling and sciatica in my left leg, am I doing it wrong? You could well be. You could well be. However, for certain people, well, firstly, we want to check, have we got the placement right? Sometimes it's actually the action of getting down onto the floor. Sometimes people will go and get themselves set up to do the tau decompression. I've already got it rolled here, and they will sit down and they will roll back over and do that. Now, I can do that, but if you've got a herniated disc, you've got some sciatica, whatever it may be, that could very easily aggravate you. You'll see what I did to my spine as I went through that process. Those are factors. Towel is often uncomfortable when you start off using it for the first time. It really is, because you're so used to doing rounding of the lower back. When you start moving it in the right direction and supporting the healthy natural lordosis, it starts to become a little bit uncomfortable in the first instance, but it will become something you really, really look forward to. So I'd have a look at that. You could potentially try it on the bed. You can use larger and smaller towels. These are the kind of things, we have these troubleshooting sections within the program, the tutorials within the program that talk about all these different kind of things that you might well notice. But generally speaking, Jen, it's likely that we're not quite doing it correctly, and it needs a little bit of work. And playing around with the size of the towel can also make a difference. Sometimes it makes a difference if you use a larger towel. Sometimes it makes a difference if you use a smaller towel. But how we get into and out of the position is a massive factor. And the same can be said for those of you that have tried the bed decompression. It's very important that you get in and out of that position. The bed decompression as a relieving exercise is absolutely fantastic for taking pressure off those herniations, right? But if you get into the position, I'll try and demonstrate. It's not a bed, but as you can see, there's a little bit of it. If you get into the bed decompression and crank, you're lying onto your bed, right? And you crank your lumbar spine into a cobra and then get into the position, don't wonder why it hurt you. It's nothing to do with the bed decompression. It's how you got into the position. Now, it might look a little bit stupid, but if I got into my bed, pretend this is a bed, and then I slowly, carefully, kind of slowly try and roll gently and then get into position, that's going to be much better. Equally, if I finish doing decompression and then I just boom, up we come, that's not smart either. There's not enough care and attention placed in a lot of cases to the before I do the thing and the after I do the thing. And often that then leads people to go, oh, well, it hurt my back, and it's nothing to do with the thing itself. It's what you did immediately afterwards and what you did immediately before. And specifically with the bed decompression, it can actually feel really, really good if you get it right, the breathing right, the gentle decompression right. But when you're on there for longer, you relax a lot. And therefore, it's very easy for you to then quickly suddenly move up, maybe to go and get something or something like that. The doorbell goes, and you can catch yourself a little bit. You're not causing any significant damage, but it'll create a little bit of immediate soreness, and that's not going to be so pleasant for you. And it might cause a bit of a knee-jerk reaction into thinking it's not very good, but actually it is. It's just how we got out. Very, very relaxing one. But you've just got to be careful in what you do after, especially if you're down there for too long. The bed decompression is one where you can kind of chill out, decompressing your lumbar spine at the end of a long day, and it feels great. And you end up, before you know it, maybe you're there, you're scrolling on your phone or whatever while you're relaxing, decompressing your spine. All of a sudden, you've been there for like 20 minutes, and we're a little bit wobbly in that lower back, so you have to be careful of that. Brad has said, hi Mike, can I only do the core 5 and other exercises of my own at the gym once I'm out of pain? Or should I necessarily have to do the back and shape workouts? So what I would suggest, Brad, is kind of up to you, but one of the things, a few things. Number one, as you're in phase 4, when you're doing those exercises, I would suggest you stick at doing those for the long term, because they're kind of foundational ones that you're building up. One of the mistakes people make, we see from time to time, is people then go headlong and having these epic leg sessions, for example, and it's just too much, right? And we're not thinking about the thing I just mentioned, right? It might sound easy, oh, go and do a deadlift, but how you do the deadlift can make a big difference. We always talk about loading up on the bars. You guys might be able to see it around here, right? When you're doing deadlift, I discussed this on the live session yesterday with the members. When you're doing the deadlift, okay, if you look, and this is another example of the ease of setup and thinking about what you're doing and how you're doing it, right? You're going to the gym and you go, oh, my deadlifts were perfect, but why did my back get sore? And let's just pretend you're using more than 30 kilos, okay, because you've made progress, Brad, okay? I put on my weight. You see how much is involved. Imagine I'm putting a bunch of 20 plates on. I'm down here and I'm pushing the weights on, and then I go over to the other side. I'm doing it over here, and then I do my perfect deadlifts, right? Because maybe you've built up to that. You're doing maybe some sumo deadlifts or whatever, or maybe you're doing hip hinges from the floor. And then I finish, and then I've got to take it all off again. That's a problem, right? And so some of those factors might well be aggravating you. It's nothing to do with the actual exercise itself. It's the fact that you're getting the bar, setting it up and taking it down. And that's the problem. And that's why we always recommend, whenever you guys are setting up your stuff, use the safety bars. Now I can very easily and ergonomically take the weights off and put them back on. And I can take the bar off, I can go into my hip hinges, and then I can put the bar back. Super easy. This care of self stuff is the thing that often isn't talked about. It's nothing to do with the exercise. It's how you got to the position of starting the exercise. Now, I would suggest then, Brad, sticking to some foundational versions of those workouts. That's one of the reasons that we released the additional workout library, because it gives you those other options to create a really nice long-term, healthy kind of workout regime. Now, if there's specific bits of equipment you want to use, post in the members area, say, hey, you know, Mike, I'm really thinking about using this machine, that machine, whatever it may be. I want to do this exercise. Fair enough. That's perfectly reasonable. Reach out to us. But the idea is that we put together in those additional workouts, and there will be others that come out in the future, a series of workouts that you can do that are like back friendly, that you can just follow for the long term. Because at the end of the day, some people get caught into this habit of wanting to do different exercises all the time. I think it's a big mistake. Get really good at doing a handful of exercises that you really enjoy. Unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder on the competitive stage, or you know, a world-class powerlifter, and you need to do some extra more advanced training techniques maybe to reach that. And I'd argue maybe the better the people get, the more they realize the basics actually are the way forwards. But you don't need to be doing 1,600 different exercises each week. You just want to do the same thing over and over again. The only thing that really should change is the number on the bar. Right? That's what's going to get most of you guys, you know, all the progress you ever need. And so you can switch over to do other bits and pieces, but just be mindful of why are we choosing that? Is it just for variety in our own mind, or is there something deeper there that we're trying to fix? In which case, always reach out to us, Brad, if you're in the membership, you know, which I know you are. Reach out to us. We're there to help you with that kind of stuff. Because it might be like, hey, do you know what? You really want to use that new hack squat machine in the gym. And it's like, is that appropriate for the stage of recovery you're in? Fair enough. What other issues might we want to watch out for when we're doing the hack squat? For example, the potential for you to round your lumbar spine at the bottom of the repetition. So a couple of things to think about there, Brad. Hopefully that's helpful. What else have we got here? We've got someone on TikTok. Rihanna said, how long does it take to see improvements doing the exercises? If you are sincerely doing what I mentioned in terms of strategy work, sincerely approaching the tutorial videos properly, with care and attention, even in the scenarios where we've had back pain or sciatica for a very long period of time, you can notice improvements in the frequency and significance of flare-ups from a day-to-day, like almost immediately. Now, does that mean you're going to be pain-free tomorrow afternoon? No. But you're going to notice that you stop aggravating yourself nearly as much. We had this perfect example the other day when we were with one of the family members who was struggling with some sciatica after a few little mistakes, let's say. And he was like, oh, every time I get out of the chair, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And just modifying with a correct squat, we covered this on the live the day after or a few days after, just modifying the way in which he got out of the chair made an instant there and then difference in his levels of pain, his levels of disability. And you then extrapolate that over the 15, 20, 100 times he's going to get out of a chair over the next 24, 48 hours, in and out, done correctly, that leads to instant improvement. Is that fixing his back? No. Is that stopping him making it worse? Yes. And is the reason that so many of you guys struggle because you're unwittingly messing your back up every single day? Yes, that's a massive factor. And that's why just being aware of this from an educational point of view and early practice with the exercises, technical improvements can happen immediately in the way in which you're doing your exercises. And if you apply those, because you've been educated to do so, to your daily life, you can have immediate improvements. You're not changing resilience. No strengthening has taken place here. Not a lot of healing has taken place because healing takes place over the months, right? The weeks and months, the days, weeks and months. But you can immediately reduce the flare-ups. And most of you, it's because you're tripping yourself up every single day that you're constantly getting these aggravations and flare-ups, and you're living from one flare-up to the next. So that's a very important, point of awareness. And then obviously in terms of time frames, muscles adapt to the right stress and strain in weeks. Ligaments, the kind of ligaments that you've injured in those discs, the annulus fibrosus, the other structures down here, they adapt over the course of months. That's at the point where you start applying the appropriate level of strain, which sometimes takes a little bit of time to get to. Brad has said in here, where are we? Brad said, thanks, truly saving me. Oh, thank you, Brad. That's appreciated. You've done the hard work, though. At the end of the day, you've done the hard work. It's an example of someone that's been struggling from years of pain. Like, you start doing the right stuff, you can really turn it around. Harsh Singh has said, can we skip rehab if we feel sick from a fever and cough? No. It would be better if you did something. Now, do you strain yourself? We always say to members, if you're feeling unwell, if you've got a fever, you've got to go, focus on getting better. That's the most important thing. But doing a few of the rudimentary movements of practice is not strenuous. Do you go in and hammer a workout when you're feeling unwell? No, of course not. But it can be helpful to just do a little bit of practice. It's something better than nothing, right? And so it's just some careful practice I think could be really worthwhile in those sorts of scenarios. But you certainly don't push yourself hard. Mag has said, oh gosh, that hurt. Meg has said, I had a private MRI recently. I told my doctor and they want to refer me to physio, which I want. Awesome, awesome. I do think getting the imaging done is really worthwhile. But in the same sentence, you shouldn't be waiting to do rehab until you have the imaging, right? And then you shouldn't be waiting to do the physio, right? You can start immediately. And unfortunately, like Meg said, we saw the comment at the very start of the live stream. I'll try and scroll back and find it. Where was it? When I did PT, we just did a bunch of random exercises which made no sense. And unfortunately, Meg, depending on where it is, I'm assuming it's here in the UK, you might well go to the physio and you're going to get given a sheet of exercises. It's knee hug, child's pose, do a few Supermans on the floor, back extensions, do a pigeon pose, and that's what you've been given, right? That's what you've been looking forward to. But actually, that's not rehab. That's not a rehab program. That's just a lucky mix or pick and mix of exercises and stretches. And it's not real work. So we've got to make sure we're actually doing a full-on program. That makes sense. That's actual rehab. What are the comments have we got coming in here? Back pain affects you mentally as well. Sometimes it's hard to cope with those feelings. Mary, you are exactly right. I would argue, especially for those with sciatica and lower back pain that's lasting for a good period of time, we're talking about moving into that chronic domain of 12 weeks, 3 months. I think sometimes the mental impact is maybe even more severe than the physical. And that's not good. But the one thing that turns that around is if you have structure, if you have guidance, if you have a plan to follow, that can really see the mental component change dramatically. Because what you do is, what happens when you're struggling and you're at the point where your mental health is being affected, arguably maybe even more than your actual physical health because of the back pain and sciatica being managed so badly. Like, understand how we got here. Anything you try makes you worse. You've got no help from anyone. You're on your own, and it could be 101 different things, and you feel like you're never going to get out of this. Like, it's perfectly explainable as to why you might feel like that and why you feel so daunted. But you then get a plan, and you're like, I'm getting educated. I'm learning a bit. And learning is just up here, right? And then you're like, that makes sense. Okay, then you get a bit of hope. And then you start doing some of the things, and you, like we said, when you start the program, for example, you're doing strategy. You're not doing an exercise on day one. You might well get to the point where on day one you do an exercise, but you're mostly learning how you're actually going to go about doing what you need to do. And then you're watching some videos. And by which point you're like, I've had what might it be? It might be like an hour and a half worth of instruction where someone's been telling me exactly what to do. Longer than that physio appointment you're waiting for. And more specialist, I would argue significantly so. And then you try it. And then you have a little bit of a success. Or maybe you push yourself a little bit too hard, but you have a little bit of, you do something, right? And you can trust yourself to do that. And then you do that successively over a couple of days. And you start to trust yourself again. And you haven't even made any real results just yet, but you've proven that you can actually watch something, follow along, and execute even just one exercise with success, and that starts to turn the cogs up here. Starts to make you feel like the inevitability or the panacea of bad stuff that's out there starts to get a little bit smaller. And gradually, as you then start to feed those together and you have daily wins and you start doing more and more, you start to build a bit more confidence in yourself. You build something that's tangible, because there's nothing more annoying. And I find it, no one would say it to me, but I find it annoying for the patients, for you guys, when you go to the doctor and say, it's just in your head. You just need to think yourself. Just do it anyway, right? And we are saying do it anyway, but we're not saying it's just in your head. And so many people say the pain's just in your brain. Like, you're fine. Other people have this and they're not as bad as you. And it's like, that's really insulting and annoying and just really a silly thing to say, right? But as you start to build a little database of experiments that you've ran, little exercise, you tried the squat. You saw that you couldn't do it the first time, but by the end of practicing, you can actually start to do it like this. Okay, I could do that. That's me for today. Tomorrow, you try it and you let go. Oh, okay, great, I did it. I did it. That's improvement. You pat yourself on the back for that. And then it turns out you're doing it with a weight. Okay, that's a bit in the future, right? But you build up to that and you actually give yourself the credit that you deserve for doing the hard work, putting the effort in, and that builds you this little database of information that suggests actually you can cope with it. Actually, you are doing better. Actually, you are in control of your body again for the first time in maybe months or years. And then you just carry on. And that's really, really important. You don't just get over it by being told you need to get over it, or the pains in your head, or there's someone worse than you. You get over it by actually producing the evidence. This is the best way that I've found helps. And maybe it's going to work for some of you guys, maybe it's not, right? But you actually build tangible evidence, proof that you actually have started to make progress. And maybe the steps, you can't do full strides. Maybe you need to do smaller strides. Maybe you do baby steps. But you can break it down to the ridiculous level, and then you build back up from there. Sometimes people will go, well, I can't do a squat, because they can't do a squat down to a chair. They go, I can't do a squat. It's like, no, you missed the point. A squat, you can stand here. That could be all you do to start with. You have to find what you can do. Everybody can do something without making it significantly worse. And the flip side of that is everybody can do something to make it significantly worse. And then you figure out what that thing is and do less of that in the context of the exercises, for example. So thank you for the question. It's a very, very important one, but hopefully that helped. Just going over to some of the other comments here. Can you tell us the right way to sit and rest while having a back injury? Hip injuries make my hips sore afterwards for whole days. Harsh thing, I think you probably need a little bit more help, because you've been coming on these lives a couple of times now. Some of you guys can get on with it on your own. Others of you need a little bit more help and support. You need a little bit more guidance. We're evidently not doing things quite correctly. We might be doing too much, we might be not doing enough, we might be doing what we are doing is incorrect. You need a little bit more help and guidance. So I would definitely check out the program. I'll paste it into the YouTube live chat. Go and have a watch of that after today's session. Give you a bit more of an insight into the program. Antonio has said, can you herniate a disc and it only be local? And yes, you can. Shoot down the leg. Yeah, of course you can. It's not at all unreasonable to have that kind of experience. Quite often, people will notice that they start off with back pain, back discomfort, back stiffness that they, quite frankly, ignore or endure. Ignore or endure. That's probably a nice way of putting it. And it goes on for days, weeks, months. You'll frequently hear people, patients this is, oh, well, they go, oh, I've had debilitating sciatica down my leg for the last 3 weeks. And then you're going through a consultation, and they're like, yeah, well, for the last 30 years, they've been getting ever increasing episodes of significant back stiffness that they kind of just manage and then it goes away. But they're happening more and more frequently, and they're lasting longer and longer, and we kind of just ignore it. And now they're here and thinking that it's a 3-month problem of sciatica. And no, it's actually a long-standing issue. And much of the time, it's going to start off first, show itself as a back discomfort, ache, soreness, muscle spasm. That's why it's so frequently misdiagnosed as muscle spasm. And Harsh said, can I enroll in the program if I'm from India? We have people all over the world that are in the program, practically every single time zone. Every single time zone, guys. It doesn't matter where you are on the planet. You can get involved in the program. So check it out. There's no issues. No issues, no matter where you are. Jen has said, I've been told I have facet joint stiffness with pain along the top right of my hip bone and pain on extension. I find small twists feel like it's sticking. Is there a way to move to minimize this? So I always find it interesting. How on earth one knows? This is not a dig at Jen. This is a dig at the practitioner that has said this. How do you know the facet joint is stiff? How do you know it's like you can't? You must like this is the problem. I've just been doing a very, very, very detailed article on sciatica to help you guys in the podcast episode. Come out soon. Hopefully it's good. I've been filming it all day, very long, and writing it. It's been a long one. But your best understanding, guys, looking for one-line diagnoses: facet joint, disc bulge, herniation, stenosis. Those are wrong. They're just wrong, right? And I know I talk a lot about the discs, and part of that is to do with, you know, something that is understandable for you guys. You cannot move the disc without moving the facet joint, and you cannot move the facet joint without moving the disc, and you don't know which one is stiff. And fundamentally, the best layer of analysis is the segment is dysfunctional. What I would also add is your chiropractor, your osteopath, your physiotherapist does not have a clue about how stiff the segment is or is not, because they cannot measure with any degree of accuracy whatsoever the amount of motion that is or is not taking place at the L4-5 segment where you've got the injury. Most of the time, when you actually look at it on an X-ray, you will find that that segment actually moves an awful lot more than it otherwise should be, or it's in a position of perpetual flexion, which is why it can't go any further because it's already fully flexed. These things are often really misunderstood, and unfortunately a lot of individuals who deal with the lower back do not have intimate understanding of imaging to make them aware of what they can't tell from physical examination. I can be very accurate with my elbow exam. Right? I can see how much flexion extension is going through my elbow joint because I can see it. I can measure it really accurately. When I do this, I have no clue how much is coming from my lower back or how much is coming from my hips. In no meaningful way can I ascertain the movement of the lumbar spine at a segmental level. And I was doing this a little while ago for the episode where we started talking about the use of lumbar belts. And basically none of the lumbar research, none of the research, more or less, is actually even measuring the movement of the lumbar spine segmentally on imaging. Most of it is just like looking. Maybe using certain measurements to try and do that. You don't know because the spine is all the way in here. You don't really know. It's so inaccurate. And we've talked over the years when we've talked about things like SIJ movement, sacroiliac joint movement, and how woefully inadequate the practitioners, they con themselves, this is osteopaths as well, me being an osteopath, con themselves into thinking that something's moving, when all they're really feeling when that sacroiliac joint is moving too much or stuck is the skin sliding under their hands. Because when they do actual image studies, they realize these guys don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. Like, you need to be, and a lot of people don't have that experience. You get taught as an undergraduate osteopath, and I'm assuming the same as a physiotherapist, and I'm assuming the same as a chiropractor, because osteopathy and chiropractic are very similar in terms of their origins. You get taught that this physical exam is so accurate, but really incredibly skeptical. Once you start working or having significant experience working with imaging, and like we've done over the past, well, over the years, but over the last year or so, quite frequently, we've been doing X-ray analysis of our members where they upload images and they've got maybe flexion extension X-rays. You realize just how poor your evaluation of a patient's movement actually is. And so making comments like, I've been told my facet joints are stiff, it's basically, it would be better off if they didn't say that, Jen, quite honestly. It'd be much better off if they didn't even say that, because it's just not something that is demonstrable in any meaningful way. They can say your lower back feels like it's stiff. That's about it, right? And you could probably say that more clearly than they can. So just sorry to go off on that tangent, guys, but I hope it's helpful for some of you guys. I know it will be, because you'll have heard that kind of stuff before. Fundamentally, what you need to focus on is rebuilding strength and resilience, protection for that injury. We've got an injury down here. You need to protect it. You need to learn how to stabilize. That is what you guys do in the core 5 exercises. That's what we're doing. We're building that ability to protect this lumbar spine down here. Protect it from being put into provoking positions. Noah has said, what do you think about the Jefferson curl when you have a disc protrusion? I think that the Jefferson curl is an absolutely silly exercise. It looks cool on social media. Can you go up and pick up a dumbbell or a kettlebell? I'm going to be limited in range of motion, but you guys get the idea. This is an 80-pound kettlebell, okay? Can we go and do a Jefferson curl and pick it back up? Can we do? Yes, we can. I have a healthy back. You don't. Very big difference. Very big difference, okay? Because sometimes people come in and say, oh, the spine's supposed to move, Mike. You stop going on about a neutral spine, okay? You should not be doing that. For the very reason that I just mentioned. What have you injured in your lower back? You have injured the structures that stabilize this segment and hold it still, hold it strong. If you are doing a Jefferson curl, the joint integrity, the way in which structures are loaded on the lumbar spine when it moves out of position and back again is not predictable for you. It's not predictable for you at all. You have no clue, no means of quantifying effectively how much loading is going through, how much movement is going through the individual segments, specifically the segment of interest that's actually injured. And so the use of the Jefferson curl, while there are some of you guys that have used it, or you'll see people online that have used it and they've made progress, and that's great, it is not something that you should be doing because there's so many layers of lack of reliability on that exercise, it's just not worth doing. And you're just provoking, you're poking the bear when you do that. There's absolutely no need to move into that position. It doesn't make it scalable, it doesn't make it repeatable. When we talk about using the neutral spine, when you bend forwards, okay, aggressively, you're just doing that, right? You're massively straining the tissues here. Those are the tissues that are damaged in your herniation, your bulge disc, and they are trying to do that to restore stability. And you are just ripping them open over and over again when you do a Jefferson curl and you're forcing it, okay? Generally speaking, the segment that is injured is going to be the least stable segment, and therefore movement as it moves through the lumbar spine is going to move through the path of least resistance. Think of this like your flexible lights that you can pull and bend them and they twist because they've got a articulated column like your spine. And you don't control each of the individual articulations, you just control the column. And so if there's one leaky, dysfunctional joint, broken joint in that flexible lamp, as you bend it, it just hinges and all the movement goes through the weak point. And so that's what's happening in your lumbar spine. You're probably just hammering that poor little guy at L5S1 that's struggling for dear life. And at one point you just move beyond and it's too much. And the strain that goes through the tissues at that segment as you move into the flexion, it doesn't increase in a linear, predictable manner. It changes dramatically. We can experience this a little bit in certain exercises where you feel the bottom part of the repetition, the muscles are under significantly more strain than the other. For example, if we do a bicep curl in an extended position, it strains the bicep more than if I do a bicep curl here. So it magnifies the effective load in my hand. We don't want those kind of magnifications. We're not here trying to get better with our back pain by using PhD level physics to figure out the exact scalability of our exercises. We want to make it simple for us human beings to actually be able to do, rather than doing something that looks cool on social media that gets a lot of attention. And so focusing on a neutral spine gives you the simplest way of assessing the load. A neutral spine on simple exercises like the squat and hip hinge gives you the most accurate, and it's not foolproof, it's not perfect, right? It's not perfect, but it gives you the most accurate and reliable way to steadily increase the weight. So you know that chances are more or less 90% of the difference, 95% of the difference between last session when you used 5 kilos and this session when you used 6 was the 1 kilo extra. Whereas you just don't know with the Jefferson curl, you just don't know. And so it's just another one of those gimmicks. It sounds silly. And you'll see people that will say, oh, well, you're supposed to bend your spine and this, that, the other. And I agree with them. And I just bent my spine to show that it's possible. Focus on building strength and resilience in the most reliable way with the least uncontrollable variables, such as the way we talk about it, because that's the most repeatable. It's the safest for the long term. You mess up that Jefferson curl, the costs might be significant. They might be severe. And we want to avoid that because it's not necessary, right? You can build strength and stability, maintaining a neutral spine. And then it comes to the question on the Jefferson curl for back health. Do you need to train flexion, right? Most of you guys watching have a life. You don't train every single day for 16 hours a day. You've got other interests, families, hobbies, work, stuff that you want to do. And for a lot of people, actually, the rehab that they're doing for their back health, it's kind of like, well, as soon as they start to better, they want to do other stuff. They want to go play golf with the guys. They want to go and do paddle. They want to go and do these other things, right? Or just hang out with the family or whatever, right? Other interests. They're trying to fix their back pain so they can do the other things. They don't have hours and hours every day to be sat in the gym doing all sorts of stuff. But for the individual that does, that really wants to do some flexion, sure, have at it once you've built good spine loading. For me, you could make the case, right? Because I do jiu-jitsu. There is a case. Once I've built my static spinal neutral loading, my squat and my hip hinge, to a good level, you could make the case that it would be beneficial for me to add in some kind of strength training in a neutral position, outside of a neutral position, to strengthen up those vulnerable positions. You see some of the guys in the jiu-jitsu space doing things like bag lifts and all those other kind of things. Jefferson curls would be another one. But is that really necessary? Is that really necessary? Do I have the time to do that? No. Would it be advisable or would it be reasonable if I have more time to devote to training? Sure, because there's a chance that a 100-kilo guy is going to jump on my back while my back's rounded. So training for that would make sense. But it's just the ability to do that in reality. You know, I'm just not going to have enough time in the day. Get the fundamentals right and then move on. What else have we got here? Can I make SIJ pain worse with the rehab caused by AS? AS is ankylosing spondylitis. I would argue the spine stability work is more important. To the degree you've got something like AS, it's even more important. The big problem with people with ankylosing spondylitis is they have these flare-ups and then inflammation build up in the spine, and then they round their lower back, and then they get stuck more and more and more like this. And like the sooner you can catch this cycle, the better, because you want the spine, if it's going to fuse over the course of decades, you want it to fuse like this, not like this. And so everything we talk about from a point of view of creating support and protection for the neutral spine is even more important if we've got something like ankylosing spondylitis, without a shadow of a doubt. Harsha said, how tall are you? I'm 6 foot. Is it true shorter folks are more prone to back injuries? No idea. I'd probably argue to the contrary, because taller guys are more likely to have to duck and change their posture to accommodate. Serena has said, I'm 27 and I had MRI recently. My results are multi-level facet joint arthritis, degenerative disc disease, and slight bulge on hitting my nerve. I'm going to sign up to your program, but I've been doing some rehab work and it's helped with the back discomfort. Hoping to get back into weightlifting properly soon. Stretching makes it worse, so I do avoid. Good. Good on all 3 accounts, apart from the injury, obviously. Just focus on a neutral spine. When we've got youth on our side, it gives us an advantage. But when we've got wanting to get back into weightlifting properly, I don't know what that means. But what I will say is you're going to be doing that as you work through the program. That's the good news. Focusing on technique, building steadily, focusing on sticking true to the exercises that we talk about, such as the squat and the hip hinge. They will be the staples that will rebuild back resilience into your spine. And when you get to the point where you're in what we call core phase 4 of the program, Serena, reach out to us. Like, hey, Mike, I want to get back into this, that, or the other. And then we can guide you a little bit more closely when you're there. But focus on staying true to the program as you work through. As soon as you get stuck in, and we're there to help you. And guys, just so you know, those of you that obviously are members, we've got a couple of you joining, a couple of you thinking about joining the program. We also have the members area. That's where we support you guys effectively, give you guidance as you're working through things, and we expect to see updates, videos of your exercises to make sure that you're going in the right direction, form checks, all that kind of stuff. The more you put in, the more you get out. It's that simple. It really is that simple. Domin has said, are you planning on some neck herniation lives in the future? Not really. Not really. I mean, we've got, I'm sorry to say that, we have to focus on the main thing. We put so much effort and energy into creating what I would argue is probably the best program. Like, it's certainly the most robust, I would suggest, program out there for the lower back. And that's kind of the main stuff we do. We do have a neck program, which is an adjunct for members, which helps give them some protocols and things and education in similar sort of structure to the main back and shape program, to help people with the neck, because fundamentally the neck it's so similar to the lower back. It's so similar to the lower back, and you've got this in the case of the lower back, it's sitting is everywhere, right? In the case of the neck, everybody's on their smart. You guys probably right now, right, watching me, you're probably not like this. Okay, what happens? Stiffness across the neck and shoulders. Maybe some tingling down into the fingers. Then we get told it's neck stiffness. Stretch it out even more, makes it worse. It's a knee hug for the neck. And then we realize we've got a disc bulge at C5-6, C4-5, something like that. Then we do even more forward bending of the neck. Like, it's just the education. And a lot of it is very, very similar to the lower back. So hopefully that helps somewhat. We do have a very good episode on whiplash. Domin, check out the program, or go onto the website and type in whiplash in the search bar. You'll find the podcast episode on that. That should be really helpful for those of you struggling with neck issues. It's a lot of education in there, and it should really help. Marmo has said, should I take steroids to help with neuropathy? I'm 7 months post-microdiscectomy. My biggest focus by far should be getting the rehab work done. Get focused on the rehab work. The steroids, jumping into that, rehab, what rehab have we been doing? What strengthening work have we been doing? What progress have we made? 7 months post-op is perfect. Like, for an example here, I'll use the example of the individual that used to train at the club I was at for jiu-jitsu. Had a microdiscectomy. And I think it was 9 months they were back competing in competitive jiu-jitsu matches, because they were very, very informed on strengthening and rehab. And I remember being at the gym, and as in the weights gym, and seeing them do various bits of rehab over that period, right? So 7 months is a long time. And unfortunately, so many people do not get given the appropriate rehabilitation guidance after they have their microdiscectomy. The biggest and most important elephant in the room is that your disc before you had the herniation looked like that, or something like that. Maybe there was a bulge, but I'm saying before the injury, right? And we had this fluid in the place, and we have the annulus fibrosus. The annulus fibrosus is what is doing the load bearing, right? You're squashing down on there, and the annulus fibrosus is stopping the fluid in the middle escaping. And so when you have the disc strain, or the disc bulge that results in the microdiscectomy, it has broken through these layers. After you have the microdiscectomy, those layers have not healed. And unless you get given the appropriate guidance, education, etc., and rehabilitation, what's to make you think it's going to heal any better the second time round? And so that's where people are struggling so much after the surgery, because they're not given any guidance. They're not given appropriate rehabilitation. So that's the first place to start. First place to start. Sam said, I've just been told I have a spondy grade 1 bilateral pars since scan in 2020. 2025 shows no progression, but I can barely do anything due to pain and weakness. What's the likely injury? Spondylolisthesis is a great example of a true or a... often when you have a spondylolisthesis, you get a nice full report, right? They say, oh, you've got a spondylolisthesis, we've got some degeneration of the disc at L5S1, let's say. Sam didn't say what level it is. We've got some degeneration of the disc at L5S1. We've got some facet joint hypertrophy. We've got some ligamentum flavum hypertrophy. We've got some other bits and pieces going on in here, right? They talk about the segment in the case of spondylolisthesis, and that's what all of you guys have. Not that you have you don't all have a spondylolisthesis, but you have a segmental injury. Because like we said earlier, you can't move, bend, or twist any of this without the rest of it being under strain. And the facet joints work synergistically with the discs, and the discs work synergistically with the facet joints, and the ligament mesh between the whole lot all works together. And then, therefore, it fails together fundamentally. There's going to be some other involvement. But with the case where we've got an actual slippage, a forward sliding of the spondylolisthesis, the segment is under more strain. It's more vulnerable. You've got a bit of stenosis. So if you have a more minor strain to those tissues, then you're more likely to suffer with disproportionate levels of symptoms associated to the severity of the actual injury. And so focusing on your rehab, the same sort of stuff we talk about over and over again, is what you need to do. You've just strained the segment, and that's probably the best layer of analysis to look at it with if you have the spondylolisthesis. You will be straining the segment over the years if you're not doing rehabilitation to build up the strength and resilience of that segment. And the idea is that as you build up the strength and resilience of that segment, of the lumbar spine, and you get better movement patterns, you start to protect that segment more effectively. Sam has said, P.S. I can confirm your program is by far the best I've been a part of. I appreciate that, Sam. Hopefully it's the last program you need to be a part of, right? Very important. That would be the goal, right? But you've got to work, you've got to do the work, and it takes time, right? It takes time. Muscles change in a matter of months, weeks, when we're at the right point. Ligament tissues, the sorts of tissues that are stabilizing STAMS L5S1, all of your relevant injured sections take months to change. And that is months of the appropriate stimulation. You cannot be there doing body weight squats for 4 months thinking you're going to be doing anything whatsoever to improve the resilience of that segment. The actual tissues that are injured. While you will be making technical improvements if you're sincerely trying the squats, for example, you are making zero change to the underlying resilience of those tissues, the discs themselves, the segments of the spine, if you are not progressing the load. So it has to be done progressive over the long term. Very, 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 very important. Marmo has said, I'm in physical therapy. However, I recently increased the numbness down my leg. It's again, I'm really sorry to say this. Physical therapy doesn't mean anything because it means everything, right? It could be that you're doing physical therapy, you're doing knee hugs, child's pose, you're doing some sciatic flossing, you're bending and twisting the spine, you're doing that's not proper strengthening rehab in terms of an objective measure. The real question for Marmo in this specific scenario is, what did you squat 5 weeks ago? And then what did you squat 5 months ago? And what do you do now? Have we built anything here? Or are we just measuring symptoms? You need to, the thing that guys need to keep track of, which is why we go on and on about the squat and the hip hinge, for example, is what do you do on those exercises? Because they are the most effective surrogate for measuring how things are progressing in terms of the resilience that you are or are not building back into the spine. The additional reason that those exercises are so important, when you know you only squat 10 kilos because you tried 12 and it was too much, you then think, yes, but I have a toddler and I put them in the car seat yesterday and they weigh 15 kilos. And that's more than what I'm doing in my rehab. And I'm much less controlled when I'm putting my toddler in the car than I am when I'm holding my little kettlebell doing my squat. So you realize that you haven't gone far enough yet. Is it any wonder we're still struggling? This is important because it helps us have an appropriate evaluation of the lay of the land, the current status quo. And so you just keep going until you've built an appropriate level of resistance and strength. And one final thing, just on the topic of spondylolisthesis specifically, but also for all of you guys, Because those of you with the more minor objective tissue damage, you can get back to fundamentally a normal, right? But Sam's always going to have that slippage, right? It's going to stabilize, okay? Or if you've had a fusion, the fusion is done, right? If you've had a surgery, the surgery is done. So there's a little bit of an architectural change to a greater or lesser degree at the level of the lumbar spine. And so the things that you need to be mindful of, number one, you need to be stronger than the average person. That means you need to build up a load-bearing capacity for this spine that is greater than the average person, which isn't actually a high bar to beat, by the way. And by definition, if you've done that using the right sort of exercises, squats and hip hinges, etc., you will have built strong lower body. And then you look to your lower body, the hips specifically, and you want to have greater than average mobility at the level of the hips. That's not saying hypermobile, but that's saying greater than average mobility. That's very important, because what that means is, in Sam's case, is it means that his hips can take up more of the movement before it starts to potentially leak through L5S1 or, over time, just L4-5, because he'll really stabilize that L5S1 over L4-5. So the hips act as this safeguard for the lower back. So the lower back is less likely to have to get into a precarious position, and when it does, it's happening much, much later. And so chances are you're not actually dealing with high forces at that point, because maybe you're tying your shoelace, right? So maybe the lower back is getting involved just as we get to that last little point as he's trying to tie his shoelace, but that's not a significant amount of strain here because he's used to squatting or hip hinging, or by that point maybe deadlifting 70, 80, 90 kilos. This is nothing, right? In terms of the strain on the disc, even with that little bit of flexion. Obviously, Sam, that's not right now, that's later, okay? But you guys get the idea. Just trying to plan it out for you guys over time. We've just come into TikTok. Guys, man, I'm talking too much. Hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. If you do need any more help, those of you guys that aren't part of the program, I'll just quickly go this and then I'm jumping into TikTok for some more questions. If you need any more help, if you've been struggling for a long period of time, guys on TikTok, you can check out the link just up here. Profile page, there's a link there, backinshapeprogram.com/start. That's where you can learn more about the program. Watch a video there, it explains a lot. And then if you like what you see, you can go and sign up, right? And the same on YouTube. I pasted it in the chat, but I will paste it in here again, just for convenience. If you are watching on the replay, then it'll probably be the pinned comment. You can check that out there. Okay, let's try and catch up on some of these messages. What have we got? Thoughts on iso back extension holds? I don't think holds are very scalable. It's very difficult when you're doing isometric exercises to know when you should have stopped. I did at the Simplified Strength seminar with Sean McKimroy, Australian guy with a really big mustache, very strong guy. We did some planks, and it's like you're getting bored. At what point should you have stopped the plank? At what point should you have stopped the iso hold? 20, 30 seconds. What does it mean? It's so much, and that's just my personal opinion, right? Are there people that use those? Great. Is it very easy to apply a 20-second iso hold to some measure of your back's strength and resilience? Not as easy as knowing that you're doing 30 kilos or 15 kilos or 20 kilos on the squat and hip hinge, right? I think it's a measure that you might use as a test every so often. How long can I hold the position for? Okay, sure, right? Do you really need to do that? No, not really, but could you do that? Yeah, sure. But I don't think it's a driver in your rehab. It shouldn't be the thing you're using to drive your rehab with. Craig has said, can a disc bulge fully heal? Should I be back in the gym after 8 weeks? If you're doing the rehabilitation work, you could stay at home doing it, but you could do it in the gym, and you could do it in the gym from day one if you really wanted to, and if traveling to the gym was not too provocative for you, the actual action of getting in the car. So you could do that from day one. In terms of fully heal, it depends on what we mean by that. Can it be not a problem for the long term? Yes. Can you restore resilience and strength and integrity to that disc beyond that which was there before you injured it? Yes, for most people. Now, if Craig happens to be a competitive world record holding powerlifter in the squat, then probably not. But if he's a mere mortal like most of us, is there every chance he could probably be stronger than he's ever been with the load going through that disc in the future? Maybe not this year, but in the years to come, certainly, certainly. We talked about this on a dedicated episode of the podcast. If you've had herniation and the disc materials come out, is it going to look like normal again? No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. It's going to be changed. And this is one of the things that really catches people out, because someone says the disc is never going to be the same again, which arguably is a true statement in certain cases where the damage is more. And then people think, oh, what you mean is I'm always going to feel like this for the rest of my life. And that is not true. Once you've had that herniation of a significant degree of damage, it is going to affect the upper limit of what that disc was capable of if you were to devote the rest of your life to building the greatest display of strength and resilience in that section of the spine. But I would argue, as I did in that particular episode of the podcast, that this is a theoretical upper limit. There's no reason you can't do anything you want to do, Craig, after you've done the appropriate rehabilitation. It might take you longer to build to that level, fair enough, than maybe someone else. It might take you a lot less time to build to that level compared to someone else. Just the fact that we want to get back into the gym is probably a very good sign from a prognosis point of view. You've got to be careful not to push yourself too fast, but that's a very good sign. But fundamentally, any limitations that anyone might have said in terms of the fact that it'll never be the same again, those fundamentally are arguably theoretical limits that you will never even materially reach if you do the rehab properly. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. It is a bit of a theoretical discussion, but hopefully it makes sense. And any other questions, guys, you can always post in the comments. Should I sleep with something under my lower back to maintain lordosis while healing? Some people do try and sleep with the towel, but I think the best sleeping position is really on your side. I have a really bad tightness in my... Amy's got a really bad tightness in my lumbar spine. No sciatica, showed minor disc bulge. I'm assuming the rest of that question is coming in soon, but that sounds perfectly reasonable. Sounds perfectly reasonable. You've got a back injury. We need to do the rehab to rebuild it. In the middle of the lumbar, I walk a few feet and it starts burning and my back locks and it's painful, unlike anything. Unlike it. Any ideas? Shorzy, it sounds like you got a back injury. Again, all these various different symptoms and presentations that you guys get, if there are mechanical things that you can do to make the back worse, it generally involves moving and it generally obviously elicits that pain. And so working to provide stability back to that spine is the way forwards. You've got the injury, you've got the information that you need to know. Of course, I try not to mention every single live, but like in the absence of emergency symptoms, so if you've not had a significant trauma, you just fell off a ladder onto your back and you've got raging pain or sciatica, you haven't got bladder and bowel dysfunction, loss of bladder and bowel control, you haven't got those cauda equina syndrome, saddle anesthesia, I forget if I already mentioned that. In the absence of those emergency symptoms, which if you have them, you go and get them checked out straight away, you've got a back injury, do the rehab work. Creating stability. Focus on the rehab, which is building strength and resilience in the spine, learning how to control it, pairing that with relief-based work such as the towel decompression and other strategies to manage the inflammation in the lower back, and then educating yourself on this, that's the way forwards. Kosipata has said, is it possible to heal from a disc injury? Yeah, we just answered that one. Yes, there is. Do you recommend IDD therapy? We have an IDD therapy table in the room behind me. I think it's great. But I would suggest you will do better if you make a start on your rehab and then pair it with the IDD therapy. Because IDD is taking pressure off the lumbar spine. It's unloading the lumbar spine. But then you get off the table, you have to live with you. And the amount of times you can see someone, for example, patients will say, oh, can I take my shoes off? I don't want to stand on the machine. It's like, no, don't take your shoes off. If your practitioner is not telling you not to take your shoes off at the start of an appointment, unless they've got a specific reason they want to look at your feet for that particular instance, and I would suggest they put the shoes back on reasonably swiftly, you don't need to take your shoes off. Why? Because you're going to go and do a good treatment, arguably, you go on the IDD, you have a good treatment, and then you're going to bend down to put your shoes back on again afterwards, and you're not even going to think, and then, well, that was good, wasn't it? Right? It's thinking about these things. Your practitioner should also be thinking about these things. Now, they might say they want to see you walking around in your bare feet. Fair enough. They might have that interest, and that's okay. But, simple things like people taking their shoes off before they have a treatment. They got to put them back on afterwards, and that's generally done badly. And that's why building a baseline level of competence before we have a treatment, whatever treatment it is, if it's IDD, great. If it's laser, if it's something else, if it's your local osteopath or chiropractor, that's great too. But you've got to think about building a good level of strength and resilience. Otherwise, you have the treatment and you got to mess it up by the time you got in the car. And that's not helpful. Education is so important. Mara said, any suggestions taking long fights for 12 hours with these symptoms? I would be avoiding that. Right now, you're struggling to recover. I would be focusing on the rehab rather than going on holiday if we can help it. I would really focus on that. That'll be very, very important. We do have a video on travel. Just type in like travel with back pain. I forget the exact link to that one. In fact, there we go. If you're in the chat on YouTube, watch that one there. That's all about travel. That'll help you. And guys, if you're on TikTok watching, definitely check it out on YouTube. because I think it's a little bit easier to see, and the chat's a little bit easier for me to manage as well, because they come in quite quick on here. What's the healthiest posture to keep while sitting? An upright one. Ideally, if you can set it up, your hips are higher than your knees, so you're sloping away. If you're like this is bad. This is better. You can see what it's doing to my lumbar spine, right? If you can get a little towel behind the back, that's going to be great too. If you can recline a little bit, that's even better as well, because that takes pressure off the lumbar spine. But I appreciate you can't write like this. Although I did see some of the guys over the years have had some pretty awesome setups where they've got like their desk and they can actually sit in a chair. They're basically on their back and the computer monitor's up here and the keyboard and everything. And that's pretty cool. But I think that's a bit pricey. From what I understand, those kind of setups. There we go. Yeah, I mean, so Mo, this is a very important thing, and it kind of ties back in nicely. I think we might be just past the hour as well. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna try and wrap it up with this one, because this ties back in nicely to the start of the episode. It's for work, not holiday, and so often we have a back injury, and we're worried about doing exercises. We're struggling in Marmo's case, right? We've still got this. We're talking about using steroids, yet we're still doing all of this stuff for work. We've got to make sure we're focusing on rehab, because most of the reason you guys are struggling to get better is you're doing a bunch of stuff every single day. And you're continuing to do that whilst maybe being a bit nervous about doing exercises. But with the right guidance and structure and education, you start to realize there are ways we can do the daily life and make it safer. And the stronger you get through your rehab, the better we can manage those sorts of out of the ordinary stresses and strains, such as a 12-hour flight for work. That also implies, though, that we're going to work right now and we're doing lots of things every single day in the office, traveling to the office, etc. Maybe we're putting too much pressure on ourselves to do that work and not enough effort to offset that in our rehabilitation environment. If we're only doing rehab, once or twice a week, that's not enough. If we're only doing rehab when we go to our physiotherapist, that's not enough. If we don't have proper video guidance, then that's not enough. We need to have these levels of support. Now, granted, if you're getting better and you're doing great, fantastic. But if you are, you're probably not even watching this video. You're probably not watching this video. So there's a general assumption that those of you guys watching this are struggling. And so I'll close out with that. Hopefully it's been helpful, guys. We won't be here tomorrow on the live. It's going to be next week. I've got some trips planned, work trips, but just on tomorrow afternoon. So guys, have a great weekend. If you need any more help with your back pain, I would strongly suggest checking out the program. Those of you guys on TikTok, you can do that via the profile page up here. Thank you to all of you guys that asked questions. Thank you guys on YouTube. I do hope it's been helpful. And thank you again for all of those questions. It keeps me on my toes and hopefully makes it helpful for you guys watching as well. So we'll see you guys probably on Monday. And if you want to keep an eye on when we're next going live and get the notifications, I would strongly suggest checking out the YouTube channel page. You just go onto the home page, you go onto the live feed, and you'll see when the lives are scheduled. And you can get a notification if you are following the YouTube channel as well. So thanks, guys. We'll close it out here on TikTok. Have a great weekend. And YouTube guys, thank you for joining. Thank you for all the questions. And see you next time. Have a great weekend.